Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining this month's session of Power Hug, our Healthcare and Life Sciences Power Platform User Group. As always, we are here for you, the community, for our admins, makers, and users, just to kind of have a rising tide that lifts all boats and learn from one another in any way we can. This week, we've got a really good panel of folks from Microsoft and a customer for an AMA. But just a reminder, we do need members to present. We would love to have you on the fourth Thursday of each month. We are booked up through June and July, so you'll have plenty of runway at this point if you're on the fence about it. I do encourage you to reach out to Randall, myself, Mary, and we can help to have you understand what you're getting into. If you haven't already, you can join the community using that aka.ms/powerhug. You can use the QR code. You can also find previous sessions and recordings on YouTube at Power Platform Hug. And just like I said, any and all topics are welcome. We'd love to see more members of the community as part of the presentations here. So if you've got anything in the back of your mind that you're thinking about presenting, please do reach out. And we can help you develop that and get you on the calendar for the coming weeks and months. So with that, I'll hand it off to Randall to introduce some upcoming events we have, and then we'll get into our AMA session with a really bright panel of folks today. Randall, you are on mute if you are talking to us. Somebody had to do it.
Great, I was double muted. I love it when that happens. So Power Hug, we've got a couple of exciting events coming up in the next couple of months with customer stories that are going to be presented. One is on June 27th. I want to make sure you all make that date. That's a very important date. We're there to celebrate my birthday one day prior to my birthday, but we're going to celebrate nonetheless. And it'll be a great party, and we're going to hear from the frontline NHS stories and how they deliver better patient care and save costs using Power Platform. And then we're also going to dive in on the 25th of July with another customer story from Bausch & Lomb. Chrissy Reichardt's going to present there on an exciting AI story and text analysis from there. We do have the Power Platform Conference coming up in September, so if you haven't marked your calendars, do so. Try to attend if you can. We're actually going to try to have an in-person Power Hug meet while we're there. So if you can make it, we'd love to see you all. And then we have Ignite happening in November. So again, mark your calendars, register for some virtual sessions as well, and plan to attend there. Scott, you want to move ahead one slide? So today we're actually going to dive into an Ask Me Anything session, as Scott mentioned. Use the Q&A for submitting questions. We'll also post some links there along the way as they come up during the questions. We're going to record this, or we've already started recording this, and we'll post this in our different channels on the site to allow you to revisit this in the future. So with that, we're going to go through and just introduce the panelists. And also, panelists, if you don't mind, as you go through and give yourself an introduction, maybe list off one of the announcements from MS Build that's happening this week that you like the most or that you found very interesting. And if you can share that with the group, we'd appreciate it. So with that, why don't we start with Aimee?
Hi everyone, it's great to be joining the event today. My name is Aimee, Aimee Wilde. I am a Power Platform specialist in the UK, specifically in our Microsoft Health team. So I work really closely with healthcare providers. In the UK, that looks like something that is called the NHS. So it's our National Health Service. Essentially, it is healthcare. It is free at the point of care for everybody in the UK. I've been doing this role for around 4.5 years now, and prior to that, worked in healthcare. I really enjoy the role, love working alongside the NHS, and we've seen a huge kind of use of the platform across things like Power Apps, Copilot Studio, Power Automate, and just following on from that, I think one of the elements from Build which I found to be really exciting was some of the recorder capabilities that have been announced in Power Automate. So essentially being able to record a video, speak through the tasks that you would do, and be able to build out a Power Automate flow on the back of that is really exciting. And, something that maybe even a few years ago didn't seem like something that we would be seeing in 2024. So yeah, really exciting. And with that, I'll pass over to Amber.
Awesome. Hey folks, my name is Amber Weiss. I'm part of our Power Platform Global Black Belt team. My favorite announcement, well, I have many, but if I had to kind of choose some that really stuck out to me, probably be the assistance for Power FX in Power Apps. So being able to actually have Copilot explain to you what the formula that you created is, and that's really helpful. At least for me, I'll go back and look at apps I built 2 years ago. I'm like, why did I do the formula that way, or what was I trying to do here? Or I'll go and take over an app ownership from someone else in the company, and I can sort of understand with natural language what exactly they were doing and what the formulas did. So that's one that's been really exciting for me. I'll hand it over to my teammate Bobby.
Hey, thanks, Amber. Hello, everybody. Nice to virtually meet you. My name is Bobby Chang. I'm also part of Amber's team and the Global Black Belt team. It just gives us the opportunity to talk to the most strategic accounts about aligning their needs with the Power Platform capabilities. So really looking forward to chatting with you all about your own journeys, any questions and curiosity that you might have. In terms of announcements from Build, my favorite, as I was talking to the panels here, to just even get the clearance, this is okay, to talk about non-Power Platform announcements, if it's okay. What I love is actually seeing the Minecraft and PC Copilot being able to basically just show anything on the screen, and then using GPT 4.0, which is actually just announced by OpenAI in terms of being available as of like a week and a half ago. And then within a couple of days, it was in Azure OpenAI. And then a week later, we're already building it into our stack. So really excited to see not just the availability of GPT model to use multimodal and being able to basically stream voice and things that are happening in video, like real life, and having generative AI basically having real life input to assist you on the side, right? Like I just am thinking like we are in the very early stages of figuring out like how to actually do that, and seeing like this Minecraft being shown. Number one, like my kids always playing Minecraft. I have no idea what they're doing. So part of me is envious. Is like, hey, can I really use this thing in PC Copilot to actually help me as a clueless dad with Minecraft? But another is to see where we can take with this, right? Because it's just exciting to be in an age where AI is going to change everything that we do from now on. So really excited about that. Wanted to pass it over to Alex for the intro next.
Hey everyone, my name is Alex from Boston Scientific. I work in the Power Platform Administration team here and support the Citizen Development Program. I think that what made me most excited about the Build conference is probably Teams Copilot, the capabilities to manage agendas, take notes. I think it's great and quite useful. Yeah.
Right. So my name is Felipe. I'm also part of the Boston Scientific, and I'm a PM for the Citizen Development Program. And what was more exciting for me is actually the integration that Copilot would have in the PCs right from the start. So I think that it's pretty useful for everybody, no matter the use. So I think that that's awesome.
Copilot PCs are great. Yeah.
So I will hand it over to Liz.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here with you guys. I'm a global black belt here at Microsoft covering our healthcare customers, and Build is really exciting. There were a lot of good announcements, but I think the one that I found the most interesting was the idea of having Copilot agents. So this is a technology that has been around for a while, but now it's really coming to the mainstream. It's coming to everybody. And I think the idea of having an assistant that really helps you take action on the things you have to do is pretty exciting to have that. And then with that, I'll pass it back to Scott.
Okay. Thanks, Liz, and thank you all. I'm Scott Dwyer. I'm a senior technical specialist on our Power Platform team for health and life sciences. I cover providers this year. And my Build announcement, it was tough to pick just one, but some of the Copilot Studio announcements really caught my eye. One, they completely revamped the UI and made it just a little bit more user-friendly, a little bit easier to use, which I always appreciate. I need every bit of help I can get. And then the new kind of admin center is really going to help people, I think, to understand where their copilots that they build using Copilot Studio are succeeding, where they're struggling, and then that's just going to help to iterate and kind of improve the value of those things. I like to think exponentially as they're able to understand and learn where it's effective, where it might be ineffective or lacking in different ways. And I'll hand it off to Randall for his intro and then to get us started on the AMA.
Yeah, thanks. Randall Aikema, technology specialist, Power Platform. Yeah, and I think one of my favorite build announcements is just around that whole concept of bettering the developer experience. And really, when we start talking more and more about fusion development, how we bring the teams together, the announcement for actually seeing the code behind the application and your screens in Power Apps expressed in YAML, as well as direct source code integration and co-authoring in Power Apps. I think that all just lends itself to a much better fusion development story. And we're continuing to make improvements there in Power Platform, and I love to see it come to fruition and enabling all developers of all skill levels to work together. So, all right. With that, we're going to dive into some questions. I'll put some links in the chat as well for the build sessions in case you want to catch up on recordings or maybe see some of the live sessions that are happening yet today and attend those, as well as some other announcements that we thought would highlight to everyone in attendance as well. So with that, we're actually going to dive into our first question. We'll put it in the chat here. And Bobby, if you don't mind taking this first one, with all the announcements of AI capabilities and copilots at Build, what's some ways to make sure that Gen AI is safe to use?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and especially in the regulated industry, like the people we're talking with today, right, Randall, is top of mind in terms of like, hey, what is this thing doing, right? Like is it going to use the stuff that I am asking the Copilot to perform in order to then move it out of the boundary that I'm comfortable with, right? Like there's privacy and concerns always at the top of mind, especially as you hear, the cases like Samsung, for example, and being able to use their source code in ChatGPT conversation to then have the source code leak like just a couple of weeks after the developers just have that conversation. Really. So that being said, like we are working with a lot of strategic customers, especially in the healthcare space, that are concerned about this, right? Because when they are working with a set of data, it's really not just about the organizational intel that they have. It's really, patient concerns, right? Like is there other really proprietary information that might impact the organization beyond just the organization itself? So that being said, like a lot of the questions is what happens to all these capabilities Microsoft is building to ensure that I still have privacy and I still have my compliance and my security and governance really at the top of mind. That being said, what I always say to people is that, hey, even though generative AI is a newer concept to a lot of organization and even a newer concept that is kind of taking life in its own post ChatGPT introduction to the world, right? Like the term of AI is really nothing new to Microsoft in terms of software vendor provider, right? Like, so the first thing I always say is that we're not new to the AI space. We always have had the concept of responsible AI, whether it's generative AI or small language model or some other Azure AI ML that's been around, frankly, for 10 decades or a decade plus, right? Like the concept about responsible AI is that we as a software vendor have to make sure that even though we are providing groundbreaking AI capabilities, that we still have compliance and governance and security at the heartbeat of every single thing that we deliver. So a couple of the responsible AI promise is to make sure that everything that you do inside of your Microsoft ecosystem and any of the conversation that you have with Copilot, with generative AI capabilities, stays in the boundary of your tenant and your conversation with the Microsoft ecosystem, right? Which means that we're not going to take the things that you're asking and interacting with Copilot to train our data set. We will never do that. We won't ever take the data that you have to then be able to share it with other folks that might have access to the same exact capabilities into the Copilot system. Your data is your data. We're nothing more than a guardian. So I always take a step back and saying, although generative AI might be newer and could be brand spanking new to your organization, I wouldn't worry about it in terms of our promise that still stays intact in terms of things like SOC 2 compliance and everything else that comes as a software vendor provider at large.
Awesome. Thanks, Bobby. And I will get my second one posted here. I believe this one is for anybody can chime in, but I think we'll start with the folks from Boston Scientific. What's the thing that you have found the most challenging or difficult about citizen development at your organization?
I think I can take that one.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think that the most difficult is probably getting people to understand what citizen development really means. I think that citizen development, along with shadow IT, are a couple of concepts kind of abstract and difficult to explain. So it's for us super important to make them clear for people to clarify a lot of their doubts. So, for example, when we began, people at our company thought that citizen development was focused on resources from one business unit to support the other business units. And while this is, well, possible, is not the main purpose, right? But because of this misunderstanding, they were hesitant because of the complexity associated with having resources allocated to different business units. So what we did was to overcome this challenge was getting some of our key stakeholders together in a single workshop focused on defining what citizen development means in a high-level environment and what citizen development means specifically for Boston Scientific, because that's also very important. And having just one single definition, no matter the speaker, it would be the same. That really worked incredibly great for us.
All right, thank you very much. Hey, we got another question for the group. If someone wants to decide to take this one, where is a good place to start with generative AI? I want to volunteer to take that one.
No,
I will say that a good place to start may be Copilot Studio. I think that the first approach that we had to generative AI was probably AI Builder from Power Platform. So using it in Power Apps, you can notice a lot of how it works, what can be achieved through it. And then when you move to Copilot Studio, you start kind of expanding that, right? I think that Power Platform is great to understand what are the fundamentals, and then you just kind of grow in the space and start creating things more and more advanced, right? And I think that now that Copilot Studio is also pretty easy to integrate with other apps, also with different scenarios, way to have different fallback topics. I think it's becoming more user friendly for people. So also a better option for starters. Yeah.
I'll add to that too. I'll go way further upstream. If you're really just getting started with generative AI, I find myself repeating this line to a lot of customers and encouraging them to basically just use it in their day-to-day life. Use Bing Chat, use Chat GPT, understand the concept of using a conversational interface, checking the links that it provides you, validating sources, and getting it to the point where it's a muscle, just like a search engine is, right? Like you don't type something into Google, trust it blindly, the first link that pops up, and move on with your day. There's some scrolling and scanning. You understand what's an ad, what's a sponsored link, what does a reliable website look like versus one that I should be skeptical of, and just start to build that muscle, because so many times we get IT or organizations sort of ahead of their users, where they're excited to get the productivity gains and the value, all that goodness that comes with generative AI. But if you as a user and as a consumer of the generative AI aren't comfortable with it, aren't sure how to utilize that technology, some of the responsible AI practices go out the window, right? You are that human in the loop. And that's a big responsibility, especially when we're talking about healthcare settings, when that data is critical to a patient, it could be critical to a billing scenario with a member. So just start to flex the muscle, challenge yourself. Instead of a Google or Bing search, use the Bing Chat UI and start to understand how you can use that day to day, just to get yourself used to practicing that skill. All right. And then the next one I had for our questions here is, how can we get professional developers to embrace and adopt low code? I know this is one I've always personally struggled with at my customers, and I can imagine other organizations do as well.
Yeah, I can start with that one. So being a professional developer, it's kind of like a good analogy is like building out a video game character where, you might be playing FIFA, and while you might, crank the user's agility level to a 10, right? They're going to have sacrifices elsewhere, right? If they're going to be very agile, maybe they're not as quick, or maybe they don't have as much, good aim, right? When it comes to like kicking a soccer ball. And that's kind of what it's like to be a developer. If you're going to put all your time and energy into, I'm going to be a really good database admin, that means that there's less time for you to focus on things like, front-end web development or being able to build an app. And so with the Power Platform, what we're trying to do is say, still, we still love low code, or we still love professional coders, right? But why not allow you to move faster and be able to really have all those capabilities at your fingertips? You really have that full tool belt. So maybe you are a really good database admin, right? But you're not the best when it comes to building out a front end. Well, that's where we can use something like Power Apps to say, hey, I'll help you, build out a quick and easy UI so that you can continue to be, the database admin that you are. And the other thing here is that it also helps us make sure we're focusing our developers on the things that matter most. So if I'm like a rideshare company, right, I want to focus probably a lot of my developers on my customer facing solutions, right? So like my app where people request a ride, that's where I make my money, right? If that app goes down, right, that's a big consequence to us, right? I want to focus my developers there. And so right, rather than trying to pull developers away from that to say, hey, we need to build an internal HR app for taking time off, right? That's actually a great use case of where we can say, well, why not use low code? We already have all the back-end systems, our, Workday, our approval systems. We can leverage all of those and build it into a simple UI and bring that to our team faster. So professional developers, right, even their job is changing with the introduction of low code and now the introduction of AI, right? And so it's not only beneficial for them to get excited about low code, but it's almost getting to a point where it's going to be quite critical for them to adopt low code capabilities.
And I'm just going to add one thing. So it's a little bit different, but I think it goes with the question. So I've seen a lot of customers that have their citizen developers create solutions and showcase them to the developers. And that's like the initial step in getting them to dispel the idea that you cannot build sophisticated solutions with low code. So I think having your citizen developers go and show what they're building is at least that first step in getting the developers to pause and think and rethink low code. And then a lot of the things that Amber shared, I think, are how you have that conversation to get them to really dive deep into it.
Yeah, kind of following up with what Liz just said, actually in Boston Scientific, we do have a low-code solutions catalog where citizen developers around the organization can share their apps. These are visible to everyone, and the idea is for them to be able to share their ideas. And if someone in Ireland builds something that someone in the US can take advantage of, they can reuse it, reutilize the code, and accelerate the development.
Great feedback. All right, next question. This is across, I guess, Power Platform as a whole. Is how do you protect against storing PII, and do you fall in line with those other, I guess, certifications or being compliant with HIPAA and so forth?
I can take that one to start with. Happy to hear from the rest of the panel to augment it. The way I see it is we have so many compliance standards just by allowing our customers to really be compliance focused, right? In our Microsoft tenant ecosystem, there's so many different accreditation and compliance that we can help organizations like yourself achieve, HIPAA compliant and certain compliance that you're going to care about in your organizations. But I always see compliance as kind of like a two-way street. The way I always try to paint it is kind of like buying a car. But it's your job at the end of the day to lock the cars and actually turn on the alarm, right? Like, so in order to be compliant, you have to be both. You have to make sure that your car actually does lock and meet the compliance requirements. But at the same time, it's really up to you to actually activate those things in order to stay compliant, right? So for us, we take that very seriously in terms of being able to meet security requirements and also compliance requirements. And we actually have tooling in the Microsoft ecosystem to help you actually meet your compliance standards like HIPAA, because in order to be deemed as HIPAA compliant or other compliance standard, you have to meet a lot of different, very specific security controls, right? Like now, some of them you're going to get just by getting into the Microsoft ecosystem. The other you're going to have to get in for you in that you need to build in as part of your process, your documentation, the way you run your organizations using our technology to get there, right? So do we help you get HIPAA compliant? Absolutely. Is there some on your neck of the wood that you have to actually establish from a process perspective to get to be in full compliance, then the answer is absolutely as well.
Yeah, I'd add to that too. Being a SaaS offering, we try to handle as much as we can for you, right? Like having built-in analytics for your workflows, being able to have an out-of-the-box LLM for Copilot Studio, right? And so by doing that, it ultimately is going to give you more time to focus on the things that matter most to you versus how do we scale? How do we do, how do we build in security? A lot of that is handled for you because it is built on top of that Azure stack. But because we handle a lot of capabilities being a SaaS offering, it gives you more time to spend on the things that matter most, like making sure, you have HIPAA compliance and everything kind of situated in that sense. And we do have a lot of offerings too, like being able to detect certain types of data that's being stored in Dataverse through Microsoft Purview. So we really do have that integration with our friends over on the security side to make sure that we're bringing the power of Purview and all these other capabilities into the Power Platform.
Yeah, and actually, I just wanted to add to that as well. I'm obviously giving like a UK perspective, so we don't have exactly the same regulation, but we have exactly the same challenges, right, of working in a healthcare provider environment, especially from a clinical safety perspective. Just to give some examples of use cases, within the NHS, we're seeing the use of Power Automate a lot for the management of patient referrals. So in the UK, we have like primary care, which is your GP or your primary care practitioner, and then secondary care, which is the hospitals. And there's a lot of management in terms of a patient pathway between those different providers. But we actually have a lot of individuals who are called clinical administrators at the moment that are often doing manual work in terms of lifting that information out of a national mandated system that then goes into kind of local electronic patient records. As you can imagine, it's often very similar process, manual, etc. But it being completed right and to the right clinical level and guidelines is extremely important, especially to ensure that patient care is delivered timely and that patients get a really kind of smooth experience. One of the things we're trying to do just from the compliance perspective, or to make that element easier, is to encourage sharing between healthcare providers. And so I'll pop it in the chat in the Q&A section in a minute, but there's actually an organisation called Berkshire Healthcare they've built out their own blueprint around how they've approached governance within the healthcare provider space, but also how very specifically they've actually aligned with any kind of like nationally mandated policy. So whilst you might not be able to use that immediately for HIPAA, I think it's still a really useful framework to take a look at. So I'll pop that in the chat window as well.
That's an interesting one, right, Aimee? Because there's one where you can help yourself be in compliant in your compliance requirement. Amber mentioned the use of Purview, for example, to make sure that, hey, in certain environments, you might not be allowed to put PII on it. Well, we can point Purview directly into all the environments that you care about. If there is PII, it gets flagged, and then your administrator gets notified. So that helps you as an organization be in compliance in your own requirements. But Aimee, you brought up a really good point too. Like in the US, I came in from the federal world. There's a lot of agencies that have to adhere to various compliance standards. One of them is the FOIA Act. The idea is there, like, any citizen of the US, they have the right to request things that the government are saying about them in their own conversation, right? Like, and again, in Europe, there's various reasons with GDPR and DSR and things like that too. But the idea is that what you see with the Power Platform, because it's so flexible and being able to create enterprise business solutions to meet an objective, if your objective is to help you run these programs that helps you be in compliant, like we've seen things even like the FOIA Act actually run through Power Platform solutions for a lot of our federal civilian agencies, where they're creating their own subsets of Power Platform solutions so that they're meeting their own services that they are promising to the citizen that they serve to as well, right? So it's kind of an interesting mix where with the Microsoft ecosystem and Power Platform, you can use and point things that you're compliant to their requirements that's required of you. But also, if you offer other things that need to be providing a certain compliance boundary in itself, you can almost run it through the system as well to kind of help you be organized and get there. Right? It's kind of an interesting mix there that we can provide.
Definitely. And just to add on to that, so I think that's really interesting. Again, with a lot of healthcare organisations that we work with in the UK, and I'm sure it will be similar for some of the health providers in the US and elsewhere, is often, clinical workforces, they're really large. They often change very frequently. You might have a lot of bank or agency staff. And actually just there's kind of a big management perspective, even just from your licensing management of like Microsoft licenses, right? We do a lot of Power Platform solutions that we deliver in the NHS is actually around automation around licensing management. So actually, how do you make sure that when someone is actually offboarded, it's connected to payroll and they actually are taken off the payroll? I think it's okay to share, but we've had some mild horror stories of some very senior consultants in the NHS being paid for 2 to 3 years after they've left, and those individuals have retired to a different country, and then you can't get the money back. So it has a really big cost impact on those healthcare providers. And the other one, just to go back, Bobby, to what you were saying about kind of providing that information for citizens in a similar way, we don't have the FOIA Act, but we have FOI, which is Freedom of Information, where anyone can make a request to any kind of government body, which I think is similar. And in the UK, a number of the frontline services use Power Platform. They have FOI Power Pages or FOI app, which actually now helps to simplify that process. That's both in the NHS, but also in our policing sector as well. So yeah, I think it's kind of almost like Inception, isn't it? Like you're talking about one thing, but we can also help you create the structures to help be compliant and with governance also.
I'd love to toss out a question because we're kind of getting into governance territory, and that is my sweet spot. I know recently I just saw the Power Platform Well Architected series came out with a bunch of recommendations for kind of architecting a Power Platform plan and governance. I'm curious, just from folks that get to work with the health and life sciences customers every day, what's top of mind for you and our folks at Boston Scientific, what's kind of your next thing that you're working on with governance and making sure what you're doing is secure and scalable?
That's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, in Boston Scientific, we've been working through the Citizen Development Program in establishing the procedures, architecture necessary to support not just the Power Platform, but other low-code technologies as well. I gotta say that probably main action that we have taken in this space is including low-code technologies in our cybersecurity policies, actually giving it the level of relevance and importance that other technologies has in the company as well. And specifically in this space, I think moving forward with our environment strategy, kind of distributing what's on our tenant, getting better visibility of what are the contents that we have, what are the different use cases, what's the business value of those use cases, and according to that business value, assigning different capabilities, right? I think that there are two groups of people. One group that thinks that Power Platform is just like piling Legos on top of the other, and another group that may think that it's too dangerous. And actually, I think Power Platform is as powerful as your ideas, right? So what we are trying to do with people is listen to their use cases, analyze what they want to do, what we can provide them, and in which way we can support them, and also design the governance in a way that is not restrictive to people. It allows them to do what they need to achieve, but at the same time, we keep compliance and security on mind, right? We used to joke a lot that this is like not restricting access to the kitchen, but making sure they are not burning it down, right?
Lock the knives too. Like the drawers that has the knives in it, right?
Yeah.
I was like coming back when my kids were a little bit younger. That's fun. That's a good analogy.
I think that probably seeds into my next question here for a little bit, and we could probably extend it a little bit. So for the Microsoft folks, are there Microsoft offerings for COE rollout and training? What if I don't have an Alex and Felipe to run this thing? And then I'd love to hear from Alex and Felipe about how they've used the Center of Excellence Starter Kit and some of the other governance tools to kind of apply the everything that they're talking about here to make sure that it's seen as a tool and not a weapon, to use a probably overused Brad Smith quote.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. I think from a Microsoft perspective, we have a few different avenues of coming at this with our customers. One of which is obviously we embrace our partner ecosystem. we'll bring them to the forefront and also introduce them. Or if there's already partners engaged with our customers, they'll often have programs for COE rollout and training. But there's also internal resources we can pull on for what we call some value deliveries, where we can do some COE training with you with internal Microsoft resources to walk through what is the COE, what are DLP policies, what, start thinking about environment strategy. And those are usually 1 or 2 day events that you'd partake in with that. I think they're cloud solution architects that actually help present those. And then there's also another avenue where we can get into PowerCat, and there's some Kickstarter programs that we call where it's actually more extended, where they're introducing from the very start of how you should be thinking about governance and COE across your organization, and then walking through similar sessions with you, building out that environment strategy, those DLP policies, security roles, everything like that. So I think those are just some of the ways that we jump in from a Microsoft perspective.
And PowerCat is the customer advisory team for those that don't know all of our.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, I just want to add one other resource, right? We have a great person here named John Landgrave who loves governance and has actually made public resources that you can watch him on YouTube. He has his governance blueprint series where he does deep dives on, what are the best practices, how do you set this up, and that's available for anybody to access right now. So we understand that our customers, you come with different levels of experience. Sometimes you can do it yourself and you just need kind of the guidance, and others really want somebody there to walk with them as they set this up. So we have different options for customers.
Great call out, Liz. You must have been listening to our last month's session where we had John Landgrave presenting on Blueprint 2.0. So thank you for calling us out and saying, hey, we have some good material already out there for you. So.
Yeah, in our case, well, in the beginning, the COE was the cornerstone for our governance plan, because the COE, you're pretty much blind without it, and basically about what's happening in your tenant. So since the administration center only gives you analytics at an environment level, so that's useful, but not at a tenant level, right? So having it installed was really important to know what was really happening. So the straight response would be that we use it mostly for analytics, and nonetheless, the COE has pretty much everything. The particularity in our case is that we do not have our whole company licensed, and the COE uses premium connectors as Dataverse, for example. So what we did is using the COE as a guide, but really building our own COE in that case.
Yeah, I think that COE has a lot of different capabilities, but of course, the way that you use it will depend on your organizational structure, etc. So I think that just using the COE, it's the first step, necessary first step. But if you don't customize the COE to your needs, then you're not advancing on it, right? You need to customize it to meet your needs. I think it has some pretty useful tools. One that we use pretty frequently is when someone creates a new app for the first time. So that triggers an automation that introduces people to the approach that Boston Scientific has with Power Platform. And that helps a lot to bring the topic of compliance into people's mind since the first time they create an app, right? Mm-hmm. Knowing that this is not the old Wild West and that it doesn't have a governance plan on it, so that they must follow certain procedures, a step to keep compliant. Another thing that we do is use the COE also for audits, because some things may fall from our side. So using it for audits and doing regular checkups on what's on our tenant.
Great. Well, we're going to stay along the lines of how do we learn, or how do we do more, or enable our different groups of users to use Power Platform. And we're going to actually ask about training options. So what are some training options for the citizen devs, the pro devs, as well as IT?
In our case, at a high level, we offer training for 3 levels, tier 1, which we call beginner, intermediate, and advanced until till 3. And for each module, we have learning courses which are pretty much groups of several learning modules that includes Power Platform training, Boston Scientific standards, and development best practices. So each learning course includes a bit of every of these topics. And the way it works in Boston Scientific is pretty similar to what you will find in a video game. It's a credit system. So by taking certain courses or certain modules, you will get a specific number of credits. And if they also attend to live sessions or provide external certifications, we also assign them a number of credits. And based on that number of credits, we define if they are tier 1, 2, or 3. So it's also a progression system. They kind of start since the beginning on tier 1. They get credits through these different ways. And with that, they advance through the different tiers. And they also get credits by having development time recorded in the platform.
I love the idea of gamifying it. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
There's a couple others that I'll just plug because they're free and available, and they're ones that I use, day in, day out, even after many years with this platform. So Microsoft Learn has documentation and learning paths to start you from, it's labeled like a course in college, right? It's 100 level, 200 level, 300 level. It helps you step through and learn a lot of the basics up to some of the more advanced capabilities. Along with if you're interested in certification exams, where you can actually get a badge to put on your LinkedIn, and also really I can at least claim that they stand up really well on your resume if you're going to take your Power Platform skills into the marketplace. Microsoft certifications go a really long way in doing that. And then the other piece that I use probably even more than Learn documentation is just our community of experts. So you've got forums, you've got folks that are writing blogs, and you've got folks that are making YouTube videos and tutorials. And a lot of that is because Microsoft has this concept of, and we're in a Power Platform community, so we're in kind of a subgroup of it for healthcare and life sciences, but we've created this concept of MVPs, most valuable professionals, and created incentives and models where they're out there on these forums trying to answer your questions. They're trying to publish content that people find valuable. It's a big status symbol in our kind of what might be a relatively small world of business applications to achieve an MVP status. And we're able to get a lot more people, a lot more information just with that incentive structure. So much like Boston Scientific has kind of gamified their internal developer ecosystem and center of excellence. We've done that with our entire community in some way, shape, or form with this MVP program. So it's why when you ask Bing Copilot a question or Bing search for something, you're going to find really good answers. You might find a forum with somebody that had the exact same challenge you were facing that got an answer, or a great YouTube video that steps you through the real slow specifics of it that helps you to learn that skill, internalize it, and apply it in the future.
Yeah, the one other thing I would add. Oh, okay.
No, go ahead.
So just really quickly, just remind our customers to leverage their unified contract, because I know many of you have it, that there's built-in hours to get training, right? And different types of training for your citizen devs to your ITs if they want to do administrative content. You have those credits, and you should definitely use them. They're helpful.
Yeah, I added, that's a really good point, Liz. I added a link out to the enterprise skills initiatives that you might have depending on the agreement that you have with Microsoft. And these are a really good learning opportunity that is specific to your organizations, right? Like, so there are courses on there that would actually help you to pass some of the certifications that Scott mentioned. There's actually even a way to lower the cost that you would have to pay for a Microsoft certification through some of these programs. And again, it's all going to depend on your agreement and support level that you sign with Microsoft. But some of them can actually be an in-person facilitated session by a Microsoft expert to help you do and get more up to speed for any specific things that you care about, not even just Power Platform. This is across the entire Microsoft stack. So if you haven't checked out ESI, definitely just see how much you can actually get access to, because you might be surprised of what you actually already own in terms of support that we can provide for training.
I think just to add on to that too, there's something that we spin up for customers, Cloud Skills Challenge, where again, we're kind of gamifying that learning experience, but also allowing your departments to monitor and track who actually took the challenge and did the training that you want, and it can be exported out and export it out and import into your LMS system if you need to. But we arrange those for different things. It doesn't have to be just Power Platform, but it can be AI, it can be Azure, it can be different aspects of what Microsoft offers. But a lot of the times we do that for RPA and RPA development. Set up a cloud skills challenge. It really follows the guidelines of our Learn material, get you ready for the certification, but ensures everyone establishes a baseline, and you can set time frame around it. How long it's available to everyone, make sure they complete it within a certain number of days, as well as you can set up a point system if you want to kind of compete against each other if you want. So we find that works well for organizations who want to enable self-paced learning and just really dive into the different subjects.
I was just going to plug one more, sorry, which is one that I found out like not that long ago. It's kind of resource and you're like, oh, I wish I'd known about this sooner, but I don't know if anyone's done the Power Up course. So powerup.microsoft.com. Obviously it's I think it's 3 months, but it's free. But yeah, I've got a lot of customers who have worked on that in the UK, and they found it really, really rewarding, especially given that you can kind of do it in group activities as well. So I just wanted to shout that out. So.
And there's some like really superstar mentors part of that, right, Aimee? And like you basically get a Microsoft MVP as your lifeline. I mean, like that in itself from a networking perspective is golden.
Yeah,
and I think it gets you up to like PL 900 as well, or prepared for that exam. So really good, and a lot of people actually, sorry, they're doing some vacuuming where I am. But yeah, it's actually leading to people taking that course and changing their careers from maybe something like administration-based roles into working on the Power Platform, which is really exciting to see.
Yeah, I volunteer for a program called Tech Fluent, and I had a mentee that went through the Power Up program. And between Tech Fluent and Power Up, she actually she's now a consultant at one of our Microsoft partners. So a nice little success story there that I have to plug because I'm very proud of her. Any last ones on training options? I know that's an easy one to go all day on because there's so many different options.
Yeah, no, I noticed that Randall also mentioned IT, not just citizen development. And our citizen development training per se is focused on non-IT resources. Nonetheless, our change management strategy does include IT resources. And what we did is identifying the people that became stakeholders for citizen developers and include them in the process definition, making sure that they understand what citizen development is about and how should they deal with people that are probably not familiar with the way that basically IT works and operates.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty important and commonly missed point in some organizations, the fact that we don't recognize that IT needs also to be trained in supporting the processes, procedures that citizen developers will be involved into, right? Because citizen development can come from anywhere, and most of the time it comes from places where people are not familiar with how IT works and operate. So I think that's a pretty important point, so they can know how to deal with it. Because I think we always joke that most of the time IT people really like to use their power to say no, and sometimes you just kill innovation immediately when you say no without explaining it, right? So helping them to deal with citizen developers and the challenges that they may bring to the surface is part of the training that we have done with IT.
All right, I've got one more we'll squeeze in and then we'll wrap up with just a few minutes left here. So had to get this one over here. Why Dataverse instead of SharePoint, SQL, or other databases? I think so many of the concepts in Power Platform are very easy to explain. I think Dataverse is a really tricky one. So anybody have thoughts around using Dataverse and sort of the value or differentiators that it has?
Scott, I'm wondering, like this one can probably be like a 2-week course in itself, right? Like it'd be fun. Like I want to throw a challenge. I want to throw a challenge to the panel, maybe on our way to kind of saying goodbye. And it's been such a fun panel to be in. So thanks so much for letting us be a part of it. Maybe saying one thing that we think why you should do in terms of data. Would that work with everybody? All right,
Yeah.
awesome. All right, I'll go last, I guess, because I threw the gauntlet. So go for it.
Okay, so why Dataverse? I'll start. So it's all the robustness of SQL servers, right? But it gives you the ability to work with it in a native way, and it has capabilities built in that you don't have to worry about, whether that's duplicate detection, whether it's authentication, audit logs, all that. I won't steal everyone's thunder, but It's everything that you would need from a database and all the backend goodies of a database. But again, it's a SaaS offering that we hand to you that allows you to store your data in a safe and securable and sophisticated way.
Amazing, Amber. I'm going to follow you just to, on the back of that, in terms of one of the things that I think is really powerful about it, and also not being the most technical person in the world, but I think is that like level of granular control that you have with it as a database, and particularly the ability to audit it in such details. Just to bring that to life in a healthcare context, you know, one of the things all healthcare providers have to do is report and analyze serious incidents. So, you know, they'll have some kind of platform which is around incident management, and we're working with some NHS organisations at the moment to build out a version of that on Power Platform. And actually, one of the most compelling reasons organisations, you know, healthcare providers have been interested in it is basically us being able to show some of the audit capabilities in Dataverse, right? So the fact that you can see whenever somebody's accessed different things, whenever changes have been made, all of the audit logs, etc. And it's much maybe more straightforward and less technical than when you were using other databases, and has a really big appeal. So that would be my plug for it as a database.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I have two, but I'll pick one. One is like role-based access, right? So you can put in your data and you can assign roles to people in terms of how much of the data they can see, what they can do with the data. And then that will also carry through the different applications that you built on top of it, right? So you don't have to do this over and over every time you build something new. So that's what I would say.
I think from our side, we'll say user friendliness. Following up with Amber, if you're familiar with SQL, then you will feel familiar using Dataverse. And if you're not familiar, then it won't be impossible for you. You will actually feel familiar if you have at least used Excel, SharePoint. The way that it looks, it just helps people to not be scared about using it.
Yeah, and not to forget scalability. I think that it brings a lot of different options for people, and it really makes it very easy for everyone to work on it.
I'll jump in. I think one of my favorite things is the API that's available right out of the box. Like, you don't have to create it. It brings in all the goodness of the scalability, the RBAC controls, all that stuff with it. I add a new table, new attributes. I don't have to write new methods. I don't have to write new functions. It's there as part of the API and available to me and my developers, my pro devs to access, as well as to pass information into. So yeah.
And I'll say it handles relationships and hierarchies and more complex data sets very easily in a way. Like I might have technical in my title at work, but I don't consider myself a developer by any stretch, and I can still build out pretty robust and rich applications very easily with Dataverse. Did we take everything from you, Bobby?
It's hard to add anything else, right? Like, almost like, how can I say ALM? And then Liz talks about RBAC. My pitch in Dataverse is that, like, look, we're not going to force you. If you've got something that's working in SQL in the tunes of terabytes, right, go ahead and leave it there, because we can use the connector and just simply make it work, not force you on a migration. But you got stuff that's sitting on Excel and Access, right? Let's get you out of those things, right? Let's actually get into a first-party data platform that's already a part of the Power Platform. So my pitch to the Power Platform is that for Dataverse is that it's a first-party data platform, so it would always be the best and the most performant if you want to do anything on Power Platform, right? Like, so that being said, I mean, every single product group from a standpoint of Power Platform, they're going to surround themselves with their best experience and the most performant focus thing with the Dataverse, right? Like, so again, like if you're sitting on Excel or Access, go ahead and let's get you natively integrated into Dataverse so you can get a centrally monitored thing, and you're going to get the best performance out of it because it's a first-party data platform in the ecosystem. Oh man, we just took it to the top. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're right there. I appreciate that everybody's perspective there. And I want to thank all the panelists that came with us today. This was really nice to have, and this is a group of expertise that is pretty rare, I think, around the calls I'm on every day. So this was really fun for me. We're here the fourth Thursday of every month, Randall and I, accompanied by customers, accompanied by folks at Microsoft. We encourage you to reach out if you're ever interested in presenting and join the communities. Follow us on YouTube. Next month, we have Aimee coming back to present on some stories of the NHS use cases. So we'll see some provider use cases and scenarios where they're actually using Power Platform that we think would be applicable to others. In the following week, we have some kind of an AI feature through Bosch and Lomb. Find us on socials, reach out if there's ever any questions you have or any ideas you have for sessions. And just a final thank you for joining today. Thanks for watching the recording, and thank you to our panelists.